The Sydney Swans begin to stink.
Collingwood's wet fart of a season continues.
And Geelong are back, baby.
This
is the DrewFooty Show.
Long road, took a tumble down this black hole. Stuck in Sunday League, but I'm on levels with Ronaldo.
Hello, you plonkers, and welcome to the DrewFooty Show Lockdown Edition. Live in La Vida Lockdown, as they say in Spain.
That's a good one.
We should be filming together today, but we're not. I'm in my bedroom having a sook. How are you coping with this lockdown?
Working in a mask for 8 hours sucks, but to be honest, other than that, my life hasn't been affected. As long as footy's preserved, I'm feeling pretty good right now, but fingers crossed.
Lots to talk about this round, so without any further ado, let's just get into the show. So there were no comments on the GWS Bulldogs game, but we will talk about the Bulldogs later in this show. But the first game we're going to talk about is West Coast and Geelong down at GMHBA. This was an absolute great sight for me. Waking up Saturday morning in lockdown, what can make me happy? The Eagles getting absolutely belted by the Cats. We got a comment here from Aaron Costanz, a frequent contributor to the DrewFooty Show, and he says, Jesse, what happened? Where did it all go wrong? Shall we bury our head in the sand and just pretend it never happened?
Yeah, it is a good question. It is hard to explain why it went wrong to such an extent. I was confident, as you can see from just the tips last week, we suck at GMHBA. We just don't turn up there. So you can always put us down for like a 7-goal loss at best. So it's really disappointing that in that second quarter when the tide started to turn after a good first term, I think the boys just kind of dropped their heads. They weren't up for the contest. And football is so mental. And I think the Eagles showed that they were quite mentally weak on that particular day. You can't ignore a performance like that. That's our worst loss since the wooden spoon in 2010 in terms of margin.
Wow.
I'm still buoyant enough to think, we could easily flat track it at home. We're still in the finals mix.
But yeah, the Cats are back. Jeremy Cameron's first game got on the score sheet. I was very happy to see West Coast absolutely stink it up because we're playing you next week, Jesse. The Derby. Mm-hmm. We will be doing a preview for that on Just the Tips and a separate video as well at some point this week. So keep your eyes out for that. But Geelong are back. West Coast suck. On to the next game. Gold Coast versus Sydney. An important win against a side that have beaten good teams in Sydney. Sydney narrowly beat Essendon. Then they've lost to GWS at home. Gone up to the Gold Coast and lost. They're in a downward slump, the Swans.
Friend of the show, UCat, asks, are Sydney pretenders?
I don't think they're pretenders because if you were to say to a Sydney fan you'd have, 3 wins from the first 6 rounds, you'd probably expect that at the start of the season. They probably set their expectations too high at the start of the season, and now they're probably coming back down to earth a little bit. So I don't think they're contenders or pretenders. I think they're probably about where they are.
You still had Josh Kennedy, I think, had 42 touches. Jake Lloyd had a big game, Callum Mills. Obviously, there's been a bit of a drop-off there. I don't really like the term pretenders. It's really hard to really define. What does it really mean? Does it mean a team that should be contending and isn't? Because I don't think Sydney are there. I think they're just a young, up-and-coming side that have sort of had a bit of an early bounce, beating Richmond. I don't think you can ignore that. But then again, it also has probably been a reality check. They're probably not a top 4 side this year.
So Carlton versus Brisbane. Carlton, after having 2 wins, have gone 2 losses. To be fair to Port and Brisbane, 2 sides that you would expect to finish in the top 4 thereabouts. Not a bad loss. I think it was only about 16 points in the end. Lachie Neale will be out for 2 months. We've got a question here from Mitch Buttsworth. Big super sub. I appreciate Mitchie Buttsworth a lot. Brisbane starting to hit some rhythm, but injuries look like they will take their toll. No Neale, no flag chance, ? What do you make of that? No Neale, no party?
No Neale, no party. I think 8 weeks or whatever it is, that's recoverable. I don't think that's necessarily the end for Brisbane. What we are seeing with the Lions is the last couple of years they've been so good with their injury management. They haven't really had any injuries to speak of, so their depth hasn't been tested. So that will be a big question mark for them this year. I'm not going to go as far as to say that they're really going to drop off with no Neale. I think we've seen games where he's been completely tagged out of the game and Brisbane have still won. So it's a wait and see. I still think the Lions are an outside chance to really contend.
What do you make of Carlton so far? Just as expected. There's so much talk that goes into Carlton and everyone rides their highs so high and then when they're low they jump on the lows as well. I just think this is where Carlton are. It's not really that much of a surprise to me that they're getting belted by Port and then losing to Brisbane and only beating Gold Coast and Freo. It makes sense.
The thing with Carlton is, like you sort of alluded to there, because they're under the microscope so much, people are really paying attention to their form lines. And you're right, it's kind of, I don't think Carlton have dropped off. It's just kind of more of the same shit. But they're also a young side. And maybe there's issues where, I think they've criticised Cripps, they've criticised Doherty, their leaders this year, which is not ideal. But for a young side to not necessarily take the next step, it's not really the be-all and end-all. It's not a big deal. And on paper, a 3-goal loss to Brisbane isn't a big deal. I think you're right. I think we're starting to see this is kind of where they're at. We expected them to rise up the ladder this year based on like big recruits, but so many times in football, teams make big recruits and they don't improve. And so far, what we've seen from Geelong is they probably aren't as good as they were last year, despite their off season. So yeah, I think they're a victim of their own sort of like media hype and scrutiny.
Carlton are doing pretty well. Like, they're in a obvious rebuild, and they're taking steps each week to improve, being competitive against Brisbane. I think that's a positive result, really, in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I think it's been such a lengthy rebuild that they felt like this was their time, and maybe it just isn't yet.
Melbourne versus Richmond at the MCG. We're going to talk to big Caden MacDonald about that, but first, I wanted to talk about Richmond, Jesse. We've got a question here from Mitch Buttsworth, a lot of butts in this episode of the DrewFooty Show, and he says, are the Tigers tired or just been found out by other teams?
It is a good question. I think it's a question that we've probably been asking pretty much every year other than 2018 for the last 4 years. Yeah. I think they've had a form slump in the first half of the season like that many times, and we start to think, oh, is this the end? And it could be. Like, that end will come eventually, but I know this Richmond team too well to think that they won't come back hard. So while it was a great performance by Melbourne, and that was an absolute statement win, I'm just nowhere near at the point of writing Richmond off. It will be interesting to see how they travel without Dusty, and I think they have the Bulldogs next week, so it's a big clash. But no, I think they're still probably in the top 4 teams for the flag this year. And on the point of the Dogs taking on the Tigers next week, Mitchie Butts has another question for us. The Doggies are still looking strong. Do you think their depth will be able to handle a Tigers side that is looking to redeem themselves, even though they will be dustyless?
Dustyless, a nice clean surface. They've got the Ajax spray and white removed, the dust. The Bulldogs midfield depth, everyone knows, is the best in the league, although I think they will be without Dunkley and Tim English for this clash. Pound for pound, toe to toe, I reckon the Bulldogs stack up well, and they're playing very exciting footy as well. If Norton can kick straight and not miss absolute sitters from in front or knock out the ruckman, I reckon the Bulldogs are every chance to win the game this week.
The form lines, I'm tipping the Dogs in this one personally.
Yeah.
And the funny thing with Richmond now is they're dropping games though to teams that will be competing for the top 4. So it'd be, in previous years they've lost to a Hawthorn or something and it hasn't really mattered come year's end. But if they're dropping points to Port Adelaide, Melbourne, and now potentially the Bulldogs as well, does that see them slot into 5th? I know I'm contradicting the point I just made before, but this is a bit of a risky one for the Tigers.
We'll now head over to foreign correspondent Caden MacDonald to get his take on the Melbourne vs Richmond clash. Hello, Caden. Are you coming through on the intercoms once again? Hello.
Boys, mission control. I can hear you loud and clear.
Now, this is your second appearance. You lead in the league in DrewFooty Show appearances, so how does that feel?
Look, it feels great. Just I really want to tap into the WA market, so it feels good to get some exposure over in the West.
So yeah, last time you were on the DrewFooty Show, it was after the first round. Melbourne had beaten Freo.
Yep.
And you were 1-0. Fast forward 5 weeks, you're 6-0. Is the lid off? Now, you've beaten Richmond. Get the lid off. Flip it off. I want to see spillage.
The lid's off. The lid is off.
Yes. We got there, boys.
Look, yeah, I am very reserved in getting excited about the D's because there was one year we made a prelim and I thought now's the time, and we finished second last 12 months later. So I now believe that potentially we could take it up to most teams, and I think the footy we're playing will hold us in good stead for the rest of the year. And we've ran through both grand finalists. Like it's not something to sneeze at. So I'm quite excited, to be honest.
You're not playing tiddlywinks, are you? You're playing good footy.
I think one of the more exciting things about the Ds is that you have like a good blend of experienced talent playing well, but also like there's young up-and-coming talents, your Luke Jacksons, your Cozzy Pickett's, your Trent Rivers. If you had to pick one player, who is the player you most enjoy watching in such a young, talented team?
There's so much, hey. Like, I love watching the Ds because every line there is literally such an exciting player. We forget that Clayton Oliver's only like 23, isn't he? 24?
Yeah.
Around that age?
Yeah, 23, 24.
Like,
I think Track and Brayshaw are a year older than him, and then Salem's a year older than him, and then Vine is a year older than them. Rivers, Jackson, and Cozzy, they are so exciting. And I was thinking back the other day, like I was gutted when we finished second last in 2019 because I had high expectations and was hoping we'd at least make the 8, but we got those 3 in that draft, and without that draft, I don't think our team is performing the way it is right now. Trent Rivers didn't really lose a one-on-one on the weekend, and he's been doing that consistently. That's not a word. He's been consistently,
Get
get around me. He's been consistently doing that for a period of time now. He also intercepts a little bit, but his ball use is amazing. Lukey Jackson is so solid. It's ridiculous. I would say Cozzy Pickett out of those three, though, really gets me excited. I love how physical he is. And his pressure.
Some would say he's a real crowd pleaser. That one took me a while to get out.
You're just getting into me about not being able to say consistently as well. Like, I love the way he can finish, but I just love how he doesn't take a backward step. Like, he was tackling Selwood and getting into him. He's getting into Ryan Mansell on the weekend and pointing to the scoreboard and not being timid or afraid to take it up to the best players and the best teams in the comp, and I think that probably says a lot about the way the D's are playing at the moment.
Caden, you would have seen over the weekend, Lachie Neale's just done a 2-month injury, so he's probably out of the real, Brownlow contention, which really opens the door for your boy Christian Petrarca. I want to know, in your 20 years of watching Melbourne, 20 plus years, is Petrarca the best Melbourne player you've seen play?
Yeah, by the length of the Flemington Straight. Before he had his breakout year last year, I would have said Clayton Oliver. Genuinely, midfields that I would watch before this had Rowan Bale, Viv Mitchie, Jordan Gisbert's rolling around. And I'd watch the Cats, and they'd have Bartel, Ablett, Selwood. I'd watch other teams and just be jealous of seeing elite players. But Christian Petrarca is the best D that I've ever seen.
You've seen Fife in the last couple of weeks. Like, he just can't hit the scoreboard. He'll bust through the packs the same way Petrarca does and same way that Dusty does. But the thing that separates Petrarca is his finishing. He is such a showman. He kicks nutty goals. And he is my favourite player to watch by far.
Dangerfield, Dusty, Fife. They've done it for 5 or 6 years, and they've won the Brownlows, and they've been those players, and we expect it from them. And then I think like your Bont and Cripps have performed since they debuted, so it's not really a surprise that they're doing what they're doing because they've sort of done it before. But it's exciting to see like a track, or I get excited by Jack Steele as well. These two blokes that have sort of bobbed up over the last couple of years and making genuine claims to be some of the best in the league. So I find it really refreshing seeing people like this bob up and start performing.
Very exciting season ahead. If you had to pick what would happen for the rest of the season, predict it, what do you think is the story for the rest of the season for Melbourne?
Oh, God. It could go anyway.
I don't want any piss farting. No, I don't want any of that McDonald. I want the straight answer. I know you like to dance around. I don't want it.
A prelim's a definite, believable chance from here. If we keep playing the way we're playing, I think we'll be one of the top 4 teams in the league, but I don't think we'll be the best. But, geez, I'm riding the wave and we'll see what happens. But to compete with the top 4 or 5 teams, I think we're up there, but I don't think we're going to be the best team when it's all said and done at the end of the year. But I think we've set ourselves up for a pretty exciting next few years.
That's all we've got time for today. Thank you for coming on the show once again. You've just started your own footy podcast, the Back Pocket Plugger podcast, so everyone knows who Caden is, but make sure you go give that a listen.
Beautiful. Thanks for the shout out, and I'll chat to you a grand final week.
Fremantle versus North, the clash of the century. I was so keen to go to this game. Anzac round is always my favourite round. Saturday night footy, we don't get many night games. COVID, bang. So I live streamed it, and the stream went very well, and the Dockers went moderately well, getting a 50-point win. It was quite an average 50-point win, though. We only played with a high intensity for about 10 minutes, and we just scored so many goals. That's what Freo do. We score goals in like bunches, and then we'll just sit back and defend.
So we got Mitchie Buttsworth, who I think is your largest source of revenue this year, Drewzy. He's got, do you think Fife forward is a flop, or give him a few more chances? I personally think Longmire, I presume that means Longmuir, needs to reassess that option and find someone who is more reliable in front of goal.
I don't think Fife forward's working, hey. Like, he literally just can't kick at goal.
Do you think he's trying to break the behinds record?
I think he's broke a behind or two in his time, young Fifey, but he is the best at winning the ball in our side still. So I just think we need to play him through the middle. He rests forward a lot and he's got a great contested grab, but he just can't kick goals for the life of him. Poor Fifey. He never has been. Looks like something that he's going to really, really need to improve on. We need to go with someone more reliable, but we don't have anyone to go with, so it's a bit of a sticky situation there.
It is a little bit. It is crazy. I think, if I'm not mistaken, your last 2 home games, you went 0-6 and 0-4. So, like, that's 0 goals, 10. across 2 games. So he's
That's
getting the
60
opportunities.
points.
Yeah, he's getting the opportunities to kick those goals. He just doesn't put them away. And that's the difference between someone like Ian and Dusty, specifically as a forward. Dusty is so damaging. Fife at least is getting the opportunities, but when it's not in the scoreboard, it's not too impactful. We got another question from Matthew Botica, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Is Mundy a Brownlow chance, or a genuine Brownlow chance this year? Already got Rising Star locked.
Yeah, no, he's got that Rising Star locked, the young man.
I should give him 2 because he's like 2 18-year-olds.
That's your wet dream, isn't it? 2 18-year-olds. When we watch the Brownlow, everyone will remember the first 5-6 rounds. I reckon Mundy will be right up there at this point in the season.
I think on the
Can he carry
on the
it throughout
website
the season, though? I'm not sure.
I think on the AFL website, if I'm not mistaken, you can do a Brownlow predictor, and I think he's leading.
He has actually been getting better every week. Like, it is unreal. He's literally one of the best midfielders in the comp this season.
Yeah.
The way he uses the ball so efficiently. Literally, WA's answer to Scott Pendlebury. Freo move on and play the Eagles next week. So, fingers crossed we can take the momentum from this and apply it to that. Because we never fucking show up against West Coast. Wait, shut up, dickhead. Collingwood versus Essendon, the Anzac Day clash. Biggest takeaway from this game, Collingwood are stinky, Jesse. Thought, the big occasion, the big players will shine. They just look so disjointed. I think they're in a bit of strife, to be honest. But not to take any credit away from Essendon. They had some huge performances. Darcy Parish, Anzac Day medal. I think he had over 40 touches. Only the second player to do that other than Dane Swan on Anzac Day. Bombers put out a great 4-quarter performance. Do you think they can continue this trend? And how much more time for Buckley? I reckon they sack Buckley tomorrow.
Really?
No, maybe not. If this season they don't make the 8, which is not looking likely, what case does Buckley have to stay?
I'll tell you what is the small factor in his favour, and I don't necessarily think he should stay. I think there's a good chance he gets sacked, or at least what was coming out of the club around the Treloar saga was that they were talking about getting back into the draft and rebuilding. So while they probably didn't get the draft picks in, I think at least on like a board level, they're thinking we're not going to win a flag this year. If the club believes that Buckley is at least trying to get the kids in and turn over a new leaf, then they may show the faith. That's the only case I can make for him staying.
Well, they shouldn't have had to turn over a new leaf. They're in a fucking grand final 3 years ago.
I agree. I don't think
all the talent's still there.
I agree. Totally agree. And they've got Nick Dacos coming in next year's draft. I don't agree with it.
So what do you make of the Bombers then? 4-quarter effort, big performance.
I actually did talk up Essendon in pre-season. This is one of the few calls I got that wasn't an absolute shambles. I expected them to be better than people give them credit for. To answer the question more directly, can they continue this trend? I think we're going to continue to see 1 week where Essendon gets pants and the next week they surprise someone. I just think that's the nature of their list or their team at the moment. It's inconsistent. Yeah. They're up and down. And because they got a lot of youth, that's going to continue to happen. But as long as they're developing the kids in the right way, you got McGrath, probably potentially elite player in a few years. And then, they finally give this Parish kid an opportunity in the guts and he, surprise, starting to hit his potential. So positive signs for the Dons. Probably not consistent enough to be a top 8 team.
The last game of the round was Port Adelaide versus St Kilda, and we've got one question from the beautiful man that is Anthony Alessiani. He says, is Cole Amon the most underrated footballer right now? That's a huge call.
It is a huge call. I don't know if I'd say the most underrated in the league necessarily, but this is good timing.
But in the conversation.
Yeah, well, this is really good timing, Drews, because I released a video, 10 surprising All-Australian players this year, or at least contenders, and nominate 10 players who I think are a good chance to be All-Australians when nobody would have predicted it. I think the point I make in that video is that if the All-Australians are picking pure wingmen, Amon's pretty much up there to be one of the first picked along with someone like an Ed Langdon, but I don't know if they'll actually pick, a pure wingman. But yeah, no, I think that's how well he's playing and he's starting to get a little bit of recognition.
The pair walked over the Saints. Cardman wasn't happy. Throwing things at his bloody bedroom wall. What do you make of the Saints, though? Huge drop-off from last year.
The thing that really irritates me is they fucking clapped our cheeks in the week between all these beltings. What the hell is with that? It can't necessarily be fitness because I think they've shown they can play a 4-quarter effort against the Eagles. Injury is not really a good enough excuse either. Look, losing the power in Adelaide by a huge margin isn't bad, in isolation, but when you add it to, the Richmond game, 86 points, completely not competitive, and then Essendon 75 points. Yeah, real alarm bells, and I'm thinking at a percentage of 67, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot, and finals is getting further and further out of their grasp.
That's going to wrap up the DrewFooty Show lockdown edition, and I don't like this at all. I'm ready to get out of my house and film some content with Jesse, so hopefully next week we'll be back together. Thanks for carrying this episode, Jesse.
Anytime, buddy.
See you later.